friendship that'll never ever end.
Run! It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Reaction Beanie Yo 473. Jack in the neighborhood. My brothers and sisters. It has been raining all day over here where I live, y'all. Like raining cats and dogs, man. And it's pretty loud to me. But my only hope right now is that y'all don't hear it. And if y'all do hear it a little bit, my apologies. But hopefully the mic is doing this noise cancellation thingy. You know what I'm saying? So y'all don't hear it at all. But I digress. Hope y'all doing excellent out there today. And I'm glad that you came on back to the channel once again to fuck with the bean. And today, we are going back to my brother from another mother. And that brother is Jose Ortiz from Evil Intentions. Back to Evil Intentions, y'all. And the title of the video is Wore Deceased Baby Around Her Neck. Tried smuggling body to London. The story of Caroline Beale. Like, where do I even begin with this title, y'all? Like, I'm wondering, like, man, okay, did she have like the freaking baby in one of those thingies that I don't know the name of, you know, when the women or the daddies, whoever, whatever, walk around with the babies, but they don't be holding them. They be like in this thing, and they either be on their like their chest or they be on their back. And was she trying to sneak the baby onto a plane or a ship or something? Like the baby was alive and the baby really was dead, but she thought she was gonna get away with it. Like this one right here, my brothers and sisters, is gonna be another crazy one. But just before we see how crazy it is, y'all know what y'all got to do. Get whatever you may need. Get what you need. Please be back to Jose Ortiz from Evil Intentions. Y'all got what y'all need. Y'all ready to go? Then let's go.
There are certain stories that we all hear about that the second we start to learn more about them, automatically evoke feelings of anger and frustration, whether it be because of the lack of justice served or because of the horrible details. While making today's video, I couldn't help but think to myself that this story is definitely going to be one of those. Not because I can't understand how this all happened, but because many would feel that certain crimes require a zero tolerance approach. But of course, there are many cases where things can be seen to be a little more complicated than that, and you'll soon learn why. Now, normally, I wouldn't profile parents who are accused of atrocities like the ones discussed today, but I found myself really needing to tell this story, because today's story takes a very bizarre turn, and I've personally never heard anything like it. Today's video contains details of terminal illness, mental health, and pregnancy that might be hard for a lot of people to make it through. So please, keep that in mind before jumping in. Today's story took place in New York City's Lower East Side in 1994. But to tell the story correctly, we have to start way back at the beginning, all the way out in East London.
I just gotta point out real quick, y'all, the fact that Jose said that he have never heard nothing like this story, you know it got to be some what the is going on type of video we about to watch, y'all. This is gonna be crazy. Viewer discretion is advised.
controversy as the woman who tried to smuggle her dead baby comes home at last.
Today, our story takes us to a little place called Leytonstone, part of the London borough of Waltham Forest. The name, which was originally Leyton-at-Stone, derives from Leyton, which is nearby, and the Leyton High Stone, a Roman monument standing on the corner of Hollybush Hill and New Wanstead. The High Stone was a mile marker that has stood in place since the early 18th century, showing the distances to other further areas like Hyde Park and Epping. Over the years, the structure has been damaged, but the base of the stone is said to be a remnant of the original monument. The area itself is located about 7 miles northeast of Charing Cross in London. Leytonstone is the borough's second largest town center, filled with a diverse community. If you find yourself here during your travels, you notice that the area is filled with everything from independent shops to popular pubs to many restaurants to choose from. For those looking for a more scenic angle of things, the location is also surrounded by many green spaces, thanks to Epping Forest, the largest forest in London. Leytonstone was mainly rural for a long time, but that would all change in 1856 when Leytonstone Station was completed. This gave people in the surrounding area quick and easy access to trains that connected to places like Stratford and central London. Another fun fact about Leytonstone, it was the birthplace of one of the most influential directors and screenwriters of all time, Alfred Hitchcock. He grew up at 517 High Road, Leytonstone, right above his family's fruit and vegetable store. They would move from the location when he was just 6 years old. Unfortunately, today's story brings us to Leytonstone from much darker reasons, a story that would connect East London and New York City in a way that those involved could have never expected. Except for one who kept a very dark secret, only prolonging the inevitable. On today's episode of Evil Intentions, this is Last Night in New York, the story of Caroline Beale.
Woo! Get whatever you may need. I just gotta say, man, just seeing Leytonstone, it's like just make me want to visit that place because it's so out of the norm from what I'm used to in America. You know what I'm saying, man? I just hope to God, pray to God one day that I have the opportunity to go travel to other freaking countries. The only thing I'm gonna have to get over is getting on a plane. I have never been on a plane a day in my life, my brothers and sisters. But if I have the opportunity to actually be able to travel and see the world, I'm gonna have to goddamn put my big boy pants on and get on that damn plane. You know what I'm saying? Let's go.
Protecting the children rather than excusing the killer is our primary focus in this country.
Caroline Beale resided in Leytonstone in London, where today's story begins. According to reports, East London is where her and her loved ones called home. When Caroline was a child, it would have been the 60s, and the area was undergoing more and more changes. She was born in June of 1964, raised by two loving parents. By all accounts, a loving family, raised by her father, who was a computer engineer, and her mother, who both worked hard to raise her and her brother. She was described as someone who was liked by many and had no problem meeting people while growing up, whether it be in school or in different social circles. By the age of 16 years old, Caroline was done with school and headed to college to pursue a career in community care. A few years later, at age 22, Caroline would begin dating a man named Paul, a man she'd spent about a decade with. Paul spent his life in Essex with his parents and three brothers. He held a job engraving sports rifles for a gunsmith. The job was at a factory not far from Leytonstone. His father worked in law and his mother was a part-time teacher. Just about a year into Paul and Caroline's relationship, they would move into a home together in Essex and then became engaged. By this point, Caroline was now working in the health administration field, a career that many find challenging, but she was ready for it. She would end up working at the Department of Health headquarters in London for about 10 years. Her and Paul had a good relationship, one that wasn't very complicated. Caroline was very into her work and spending time with her family and friends. while Paul was a lover of sports and music, a big fan of the Queen's Park Rangers Football Club out of West London, and a fan of bands like Portishead, who hailed from Bristol. Paul also enjoyed spending time with his friends. He didn't consider himself to be a romantic person, or someone who did thoughtful things like get Caroline flowers, but he did care for her a great deal, always making sure that he was loving and that they had a peaceful home to be in together. They both did their part, and it appeared that they confided in one another whenever needed.
Right now, what I'm wondering, y'all, because it just seemed like so far so good, man. Both of them came from good households, you know what I'm saying? They got together, everything going good. I think Jose said they got engaged and all that. They got good jobs, you know what I'm saying? They seem like good people. So what is the breaking point? How is Caroline gonna go from living this life to freaking, I hate to even say it, but having a dead baby hanging from her chest, trying to smuggle the dead baby back into another country? Like, how do we go from here to there? And then I keep saying dead baby, but I'm more than likely, y'all, this is gonna be her child, right? This is crazy. Let's go.
Life was relatively simple for the most part, and their relationship was just as normal as any other. But things would take a devastating turn when Caroline and her loved ones were faced with a huge loss. Caroline had a best friend with whom she was very close, a woman named Allison. Allison was the fiancée of one of Paul's brothers. Her and Caroline knew one another for 7 years, and they would become much closer as time went on. They were all a tight-knit group, spending a lot of time with one another and going on family outings. Allison was viewed as someone who brought everyone together, so what was to come was devastating. In 1991, Allison would fall very ill, and she was diagnosed with breast cancer. The disease hit very hard, but after treatment, there was no longer any sign of the cancer, and she started to feel much better. The news of Allison getting sick was a lot for everyone, so Caroline, Paul, and the rest of their circle were more than happy to see that she was feeling like her old self again, much healthier and in better spirits. But the good news would be short-lived. By July of 1993, Allison was sick again, but this time it was much worse. It got so bad that she could barely walk up the stairs to her apartment. When visiting doctors, there were no signs that the cancer had returned. It wouldn't be until September of 1993 that they saw in tests that the cancer was back, and it had now spread throughout her entire body, resulting in her needing to have her ovaries removed. But Allison still had hope, and she was making plans for the future with her friends and family. But those around her could see that this time, she might not make it. Over the following months and into 1994, her condition was worsening, and she began to rapidly lose weight. Due to the disease hitting her so hard, in May of that year, she was admitted to the Marie Curie Hospice, located in London. While here, the cancer was relentless, taking a toll on her body, also resulting in a loss of her vision. Her suffering would finally come to an end on June 16th of 1994, when she passed away. This would have been...
I just gotta point out real quick, y'all. I freaking hate cancer, man. Like, I fucking hate cancer, y'all. Like, seriously, man. Like, just the fact that this cancer can happen to any and everybody, and it has no freaking age range or nothing. You know what I'm saying? And you can be living the most healthiest life ever and still get freaking cancer. And then another thing that pissed me off about it, and this is like coming from like real life. Like in my real life, I have seen people who beat cancer and then years later get cancer again and freaking die, like it come back or whatever. Like, it's just one of those most evil, like, freaking things in this world that we live in that I absolutely 100% hate, because how it just could happen to any and everybody, man. Let's go.
In the same month that Caroline was due to celebrate her birthday, but celebrations were the last thing on anyone's mind after Allison passed. Her passing affected everyone greatly, with Caroline, Paul, his brothers, and anyone who knew her being overcome with grief. Seeing Allison suffer through this was horrible to begin with. It was extremely heavy and nearly impossible to make it through. After seeing her best friend slowly lose her life over the course of time, Caroline would become very withdrawn. She didn't want to leave her home. She fell into a very deep depression. She knew everyone around her was also dealing with the same grief, so she kept it to herself. She would wake up early in the morning before Paul even woke up, just so she can go downstairs and cry alone. She didn't want to draw attention to herself. Whenever she fell asleep, it was for up to 11 or 12 hours a night. She would find herself having nightmares about Allison, even having visions of her in her bedroom. It was as if she was on autopilot, in a daze, and not herself at all. Her crying would last hours. It was clear that Allison's death was a crushing blow for everyone, and it would appear that Caroline was among those struggling the hardest. On September 14th of 1994, Caroline, Paul, and his brothers would decide to travel to none other than the Big Apple. But this trip would end up being one that they would never forget. And unfortunately, I don't mean that in a good way. On September 14th of 1994, Caroline and Paul, along with his brothers, arrived in New York City. The trip was Paul's brother's idea, the same brother who was engaged to Allison, as mentioned earlier. He thought a trip would help take their minds off all the grief they'd suffered. Once they landed in New York, they went to their hotel to drop off their belongings, and then they would go out and venture into the big city, visiting places like the Empire State Building and the Twin Towers throughout their trip. It was their first time in the United States, so they did all the things that tourists normally did. They sent postcards back home, letting friends and neighbors know that they had made it safely. The trip was a welcome distraction from the reality back home, but in the weeks leading up to the trip, Caroline's behavior only seemed to worsen. She was moody, often irritable, and very tired. Paul and his brothers would often ask her what was wrong, and she would always give them the same answer: "I'm fine."
Okay, time out, y'all. Time out. Let's time this video out real quick, man, because I got some stuff going through my brain. So y'all follow me real quick. Okay, I'm sitting right here thinking that it's Caroline baby who, that she gonna have hanging from her freaking neck or whatever, wore around her neck. But now I'm starting to feel like it's not her freaking baby, because they just gone to the United States. They just gone to New York on like a vacation type of thing. And so far, Jose Ortiz, my brother from another, has not mentioned nothing about her even getting pregnant or let alone having a baby. You know what I'm saying? See, I was thinking that maybe they had moved to the United States for some years and then they eventually had a kid. But it just seemed like they just on a vacation. So it gonna take at least 9 months for her to get pregnant and have a baby and all that. So now I'm starting to feel like maybe on this freaking vacation she killed somebody, or her boyfriend or the other person or whoever helped her kill this baby, and then they took the baby, which will make this stuff even more crazy. It's still crazy in the way it go, but I'm just saying, man, is it her child or is this gonna be somebody else's child? I don't know. Let's go.
They didn't want to pry because they understood that she had suffered the same loss as they did. But everyone's different. People handle grief a lot of different ways, and she hadn't experienced a loss like this before. So they left it alone. Even on their sightseeing trips around the city, she was very unfocused, staring off into the distance in a trance-like state. When it came time to return to their hotel room, she was always looking forward to it. She didn't feel like being out. A big part of her felt like she was forced into the trip, and another side of her felt like maybe, just maybe, it might help. But it did very little to take her mind off anything. During their time alone, Paul and Caroline would have discussions about her mood, and he would tell her that she needed to begin taking the steps to get over Allison's death. Just because he didn't want it to consume her, but her mood remained the same. There were also mentions about Paul being on the fence about their relationship in general by this point, because they hadn't been intimate for so long. This would lead Paul to deciding it was best to give her some space, so Caroline would spend much of her time in room 101 at Off Soho Suites on Rivington Street. The location is considered a more affordable alternative in comparison to the expensive hotels around the city. It's also in a prime location, close to subway stations, restaurants, and a lot to do in the area. The business still stands there today. Paul went out with his brothers, doing more sightseeing and visiting bars and clubs in the city. Caroline wanted nothing more than to just come home at that point. But on Thursday, September 22nd of 1994, just a day before they were due to fly back to London, things would take a very strange and morbid turn. That day, Caroline, Paul, and his brothers decided to go shopping for souvenirs and clothes so they could take back home. After they were done shopping, they took a ferry cruise around the harbor that afternoon. But halfway through the cruise, Caroline began to feel very ill. She had painful cramps and was extremely nauseous. They thought that maybe the boat ride made her sick, prompting them to take a cab back to their hotel as soon as the cruise was done. While back in her room, Caroline fixed a bath for herself and rested. It made her feel a little bit better. She had enough energy to go out and get dinner with everyone. After dinner, they would make their way back to the hotel once again around 9:30 p.m., and those intense stomach pains had returned. She would jump back into a bath, and it helped just a bit, but she most definitely wouldn't be going out again. Paul.
Okay, now I gotta pause it again, y'all. And I know that y'all, some of y'all, this might just sound absolutely freaking crazy, but it seemed like this lady may have been pregnant and didn't know it, and she about to have the freaking baby in the tub. I gotta throw it out there, my brothers and sisters. It's a possibility. Anything is possible. And the way Jose keeps saying about the freaking cramps, she not feeling good, she keep getting back in the tub. I believe this lady finna give birth. But how you gonna give birth and you ain't know you were pregnant? Like, I have heard of stories like that about women not knowing they're pregnant, but this would be crazy to hear it right now. I don't know. Let's go.
Paul and his brothers wanted to stay and make sure that she was okay, but she would insist that they go out and follow through with their plans. She would say to Paul, "You shouldn't waste your last night in New York." So they went out, leaving Caroline back at the hotel. Now she was alone with severe pain and found herself in the bathtub yet again, trying to get some relief, but it wasn't going away. It became much worse. She spent hours in agony, feeling like this pain would never end, until it was clear that this wasn't normal. Caroline was giving birth, delivering a baby that nobody ever knew she was even having. She began to push as hard as she could, the water in the bath changing color as she was crowding. She pushed harder and harder and pulled the baby out, giving birth right in the bathtub of her hotel room.
Well, I called up with my brothers and sisters, and it's making a lot of stuff make sense to me now. Because I was wondering, like, who child is it that she did this with? You know what I'm saying? Trying to sneak back into London. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, because they only been there for, like, they on vacation. It ain't like they was living there. You know what I'm saying? They going back in a couple of days or whatever. You know what I'm saying? She can't get pregnant and have a baby all in that time. So I'm thinking that maybe it's somebody else. But come to find out, it's her and she been pregnant. And I'm thinking now that maybe she knew she was pregnant, but her boyfriend didn't. I don't know, but this is just freaking crazy that she didn't tell nobody if she did know. Let's go.
Caroline had been 9 months pregnant and had been keeping it hidden from everyone this entire time. She believed that at one point during the delivery, she might have passed out from the extreme pain, as her baby, a newborn girl, lay in the water, floating. She would cut the umbilical cord with a pair of nail scissors nearby and left her baby in the tub while she went to the toilet. Here, she would deliver the afterbirth and then flushed it down. According to her, the baby looked very pale. It didn't move, didn't cry, and it didn't appear to be breathing. Instead of calling for help or going to a hospital, Caroline would go into the hallway where she found a plastic bag from a store named Canal Street Jeans. She then took the baby from the tub and placed her in the bag. After this, she cleaned up the bathroom to rid it of any signs of pregnancy, showered, and then laid the baby in the bag next to her. It's hard to say what exactly might have been going through her mind at this point. Many could never see themselves doing such a thing. It was cold, thought out, and it didn't seem she had any attachment to her baby. Those strong motherly instincts you often hear about at a time like this, she didn't display those. After a while, she took the baby in the bag and hid her in a duffel bag. placing her in the closet so that Paul wouldn't see when he returned. Nobody in the hotel heard Caroline while she was giving birth, at times even screaming out for Paul during the delivery. It felt as if the birth had been tearing apart her body. Paul and his brothers got back later on, and they all went to sleep so they could be up the following morning to tour the city one last time before heading back to London. They had absolutely no clue of what had taken place in that room just hours before.
And they also ain't got no clue that it's literally a dead baby in this freaking hotel room that y'all in going to sleep. And the baby daddy is your child that's deceased in the same goddamn hotel room that you going to sleep in, man. Are you freaking kidding me? I could go on and on about freaking Caroline right now, but I'm not gonna do that, my brothers and sisters. I'm not gonna go crazy. We just gonna keep going.
The next morning, Friday, September 23rd of 1994, Caroline would store most of her luggage in a room behind the front desk at the hotel. Caroline would close the door behind her. The people at the front desk just assumed that she wanted privacy to look through her bags, or maybe even to change. Nothing came off as out of the ordinary, but of course, she was doing this because she didn't want anyone to see what she was hiding. She would tie a string around the bag containing her child and hung it around her neck under her clothes, with half of the bundle tucked into her pants. She ate breakfast and walked around the city with her dead baby girl hidden the entire time.
Okay, this is just getting crazy, man. I know I keep stopping it, my brothers and sisters, but do y'all believe what we hearing right now? This has just went completely different than what I was envisioning it to be. The fact that she the fact that she hiding the baby and got it tied around her neck and she walking around the city with it. See, that's the type of stuff that make me feel like that I ain't crazy when I be thinking that when I'm out in public, somebody could potentially have a baby in they freaking book bag or they pocketbook or any damn thing. You know what I'm saying? Anything is possible, and this just proves it. She literally walking around the freaking city with a deceased baby tied to her. Let's go.
She made her way back to the hotel so she could prepare for their flight. The group gathered their belongings and went to the checkout counter of the hotel. The manager of the location at the time would help them arrange their taxi to JFK Airport. Caroline seemed to be in a much better mood because, in their words, Caroline was, quote, peppy and very talkative. The hotel manager even remembers telling his wife how pleasant Caroline was. Nobody suspected a thing. Room 101, where Caroline gave birth, was clean, and when housekeepers came into the room to clean it, the only thing they found was a bloody towel. The housekeepers assumed she might have gotten her period, and they thought nothing of it, discarding it straight away. The group would arrive at JFK later that day, where they went for one final drink before their flight. Caroline went to the bathroom, and after, they all made their way to airport security. JFK Airport was very busy that evening, but of all the people looking to board their flights, Caroline stood out to a security guard who had been scanning the terminals for any strange behaviors. This is common and done for safety purposes. She stood out because she seemed to be lingering around, looking scared. When security saw this, they got the attention of a security supervisor who also noticed her odd behavior. Caroline slid a bag onto the belt to be checked by security, but she hung around the security gate near the x-ray machine, hesitant to pass through. The supervisor walked over to Caroline and asked her to walk through, but she refused, saying that she was pregnant and she was afraid that the x-ray machine would harm the child inside of her. The supervisor quickly responded that she didn't appear to be pregnant at all, but did look to be hiding something. She poked at Caroline's stomach and felt something firm, making her even more suspicious, thinking maybe she had a weapon or was trying to smuggle drugs. By this point, she was trembling with fear, and she would tell security her name. She told them she was on her way back to London on an Air India flight. She looked shocked, becoming more and more nervous, and saying that she changed her mind. She no longer wanted to take the flight to London, but the red flags were all over the place, and a body search was quickly authorized by security. This is when Caroline asked if she could speak to them in private. She was taken to a room at the airport where she seemed to be agitated one moment and emotionless the next. Security asked her to lift her shirt to reveal what she had hidden. She followed their instructions and began to remove what looked to be a somewhat heavy bundle. "This is my baby," Caroline said. The officer couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Where's your baby?" she replied, with Caroline responding that the baby was in the bag. The security officer then ran outside and called authorities. Caroline's secret was now out on the open, and she would...
Boy, I bet them freaking security guards would have never in a million years thought that that's what the hell she was hiding. You know what I was like, dude, can you imagine being one of those security officers? Especially the one who actually poked her stomach and trying to figure out what it was. Not in a million, kabillion, gazillion years would you think it was a child, a baby. Whew.
Began to get extremely anxious, saying over and over again that her boyfriend didn't know and he couldn't find out, asking herself out loud, what would Paul think? The officer felt very bad for Caroline. She assumed that the baby was a late miscarriage, and the officer knew what it felt like to lose a child, since she had experienced a miscarriage herself. But the officer began to question if Caroline really cared at all, because she watched her drop the bag containing her deceased baby girl on the floor like it was nothing. The dramatic scene continued to unfold at JFK, and other security officers went to the security gate to look for Paul and his brothers, letting them know that Caroline was very sick and was in need of medical attention. Security then returned to Caroline and put her in handcuffs since she appeared to be emotionally disturbed, and they didn't want her to harm herself or anyone else. The bag containing her baby was soon opened, releasing a powerful odor. She was 20 inches long and weighed almost 8 pounds. She looked to be asleep, described as a beautiful child by the few people who saw her, even though she was lying on the ground, lifeless. Caroline continued to break down, scratching at her chest and saying, "I don't want my boyfriend to know." But it was too late to hide it any further. A medical examiner was called to the scene, and they determined that the baby had been dead for at least 15 hours, meaning her child wasn't born dead. She had been breathing at one point, and it appeared to them that this child had been suffocated, resulting in her death. Caroline was then taken to Queens General Hospital, where detectives handcuffed her to the bed, and she was placed under arrest. After all this unfolded, the security officers who made the dark discovery would set up a memorial at the airport right outside of the room where Caroline was held, complete with a bouquet of flowers, balloons, and a banner with a name on it. They named the baby Avi, short for aviation, showing that regardless of the circumstances surrounding this terrible situation, the baby wasn't forgotten. The baby's body went unclaimed for some time, eventually being released from the medical examiner's office. Caroline thought that the baby's body was being held at a mortuary at first, until they learned that she would be sent to Potter's Field on Hart Island for burial. Hart Island being a location that is used for the burial of individuals whose identities are unknown or remain unclaimed. The baby was later named Olivia Ann by Caroline and her family. That same evening at the airport, Paul was informed of the full story by detectives. Him and his brothers were also arrested at first, since authorities had no idea who knew what, but they were released shortly after. Detectives placing Caroline under arrest for suffocating her child would be the very first time that Paul learned he was a father. He was until...
That's some crazy-ish, man. That's the first time he learned out, period. Not only that he have officially became a father and the child is born, he didn't know nothing about a child, period. He didn't even freaking know she was pregnant. Yeah, Jose, I agree with you. I ain't never heard no ish like this. This is different.
Total shock. He was hurt and confused by the entire situation. How could this be possible? But looking back at past events, thinking back to how she had been behaving, things began to make sense for him. He thought back to when Caroline first began behaving oddly. It was when Allison started to feel very ill before she passed away. But what nobody knew at the time was that Caroline learned about her pregnancy just 2 days after Allison found out she would need to have her ovaries removed. Allison always wanted children, but now this would be impossible. According to Caroline, she didn't want to take attention away from Allison, whose health was declining rapidly due to her cancer, and she felt bad for telling her she was having a baby, since she wouldn't be able to have children anymore. She started to wear baggy clothes and avoided Paul and family as much as she could. Her behavior described earlier wasn't just due to her friend's passing, it was her actively trying to hide her pregnancy, which she did successfully until her...
And another thing I gotta throw out there real quick, y'all. It makes sense now why that because earlier Jose said that they had stopped being intimate for a long time. That was just another way she was hiding it. That's why he wasn't getting none, because she didn't want him to see her damn stomach. You know what I'm saying? She basically didn't want him to see her naked. Wow.
Her last night in New York. Her and Paul's relationship had suffered while she was in a deep depression, something everyone attributed to Allison's passing. There was no reason to make such a drastic assumption, especially when Caroline hid it so well. Neighbors and friends clearly remember seeing her just a few days before she flew to New York City, and there were no signs of a pregnancy. Earlier, I spoke about nightmares Caroline had involving Allison. It turns out, those nightmares involved the deceased Allison telling Caroline that she was lonely and she wanted her baby to keep her company. This would somehow convince her that the baby was dead inside of her, or would be born dead, even though she often experienced symptoms consistent with being pregnant. The news of this secret birth was devastating. In London, Caroline's parents would first learn of the horrific ordeal on her father's birthday. They had no idea how to respond or how to feel, but one thing they felt sure of was that their daughter wasn't capable of such a horrific crime. While she was at the hospital, Paul did everything he could to contact Caroline, to make sense of this, to ask why she would do such a thing, but she refused to speak to him, offering no explanation. He would eventually board a plane back home, and while there, also found himself feeling very depressed and still very much in shock. He began writing Caroline letters over and over until finally they spoke on the phone. He tried his best to support her, still confused about it all, his mind filled with questions. Setting his feelings aside, Caroline would say that she truly believed this baby was deceased when born, but authorities felt otherwise, and she was sent to the notorious Rikers Island on a second-degree murder charge. While on the island, she was held at the Rose M. Singer Center, also known as Rosie's, where she shared a cell with 5 other women, with no privacy. That's no surprise, given the crime that she was accused of. Her family members were vocal about America's justice system, saying that the treatment of their daughter was archaic and barbaric, since they believed that their daughter was experiencing a severe mental break and couldn't be in the right frame of mind to let all of this play out the way it did. They believed she needed support and real help, not to be treated like a criminal. But the truth is, she was a criminal, and it was very hard for many to see things their way, especially in New York City, where this sort of thing had unfortunately been happening so often. Mothers discarding their children with no remorse. Her parents, who had spent time saving their money for retirement, now found themselves spending it all on legal fees for their daughter, getting a lawyer to represent her in New York, and traveling to Rikers Island to go visit her every month. She looked...
Like, I get it, man. I get it, y'all, that her parents are, like, on her side, you know what I'm saying, and thinking she should be free and all that. I understand that her parents, you know, they love their daughter. But at the end of the day, like Jose said, man, she is a criminal. What she did was a crime, man, and you got to do the time. You got to do the time. No matter who you are, no matter what relation you have to me, at the end of the day, you do the crime, you got to do the time.
Frail, sick, and stressed when they saw her. Her mother recalled Caroline's first words to them when they visited. She said, "I've done nothing wrong. Why won't they believe me?" Before crying in her mother's arms. After each visit, she was strip searched to check for items that might have been passed to her, no different from how every other inmate was treated at Rikers. Paul never visited while she was in prison. Part of him wanted to, but he was obviously very hurt. A relationship he had spent almost a decade in was now in shambles over a lie. The reasons for that lie are debatable, and many saw that Caroline was distraught and not in her right mind. But it was still a lie, one he couldn't see himself disregarding as quickly as everyone else had hoped. Her and Paul had discussed starting a family in the past, but they were never sure when that would be, since they wanted to be prepared. But when she found out a baby was inside of her, she didn't confide in anybody. Paul was blamed by family and Caroline's parents. They said he hadn't done enough, that he didn't see what his wife was going through, that he was dismissive of her obvious depression. Paul was quoted as saying, "It has been hard for me, losing everything I had with Caroline, and hearing people say it was my fault, that I should have known something. I know her father thinks I could have done more, and he says I can't speak unless I have a few beers. It's not true. I used to dread going round to see Caroline's parents, so that's why they didn't see the best of me. I prefer to be out with my friends. I'm not a romantic kind of person. I didn't buy Caroline flowers or chocolates, but I did give her a good home and thought she could tell me anything. I never thought she lacked emotional support."
Man, that's just complete BS as far as like his Caroline parents and whoever else out there trying to say that it's his fault. That ain't his damn fault that she did that. You know, I mean, like, come on, bro. He didn't even freaking know that she was pregnant. She didn't even tell him that much. You know what I'm saying? Like, there is no way you can flip that around on him. No way. Point blank, period.
Caroline lost her best friend, and it clearly had a devastating effect on her. But Paul, he had now lost his fiancée and his child. A child he was never even aware was on its way. They had stopped being intimate since Allison's death, back when Caroline found out she was pregnant, so it was easy for her to hide it. Regardless of their feelings of America's justice system, it was clear that she had gone through certain measures to conceal her pregnancy, up until the very last moment. It seemed that special treatment was expected, even though the true victim of this entire ordeal was the baby, who was left to die. In letters to her family, Caroline would further insist that she thought the baby was already gone, and she couldn't see herself leaving it behind, prompting her to take the baby with her. Many questions surrounded her pregnancy in general, and what took place in the moments after the baby was born remained unclear. But once her trial took place, more information would be released. According to the prosecution and the medical examiner's office, Olivia Ann was a full-term healthy baby, and the baby had been breathing for at least 15 minutes before she was suffocated and killed. Caroline's defense would argue that she was suffering from a severe case of postpartum psychosis, but experts argued back, stating that this doesn't take place immediately after the child is born. The prosecutor on the case was at the trial to represent the interests of baby Olivia Ann. She had the following to say regarding the charges filed against Caroline. "I don't have to prove motives. All I have to prove is that she acted with depraved indifference to human life, not what caused her to do this. I'm prepared to be persuaded that Caroline was sick, but it's just as likely that she had some other motive for killing the baby."
And I just gotta ask this question real quick. Okay, you can say all that and all that, Caroline, about how you just thought the baby was already dead and all that. But why wouldn't, after you have realized that the baby dead, why wouldn't you tell nobody then? Why would you take your baby and hang it around your freaking neck and try to go back to London with it? Your dead baby. You should have been calling 911 as soon as you thought your baby was dead, right? Can you explain that part to me, Caroline? Crazy.
And so, this would be the arguments had throughout the trial. One side arguing that Caroline was calculated and went through lots of effort to hide this secret child, eventually taking the child's life in cold blood with her own hands, while the other side argued that she wasn't herself at all. She was suffering from a psychotic episode and truly believed her child was gone when placed into the bag, resulting in the baby suffocating inside. Either way, this child did lose her life in the care of her mother, regardless of the reason. While imprisoned and while on trial, Caroline received a lot of support from women who saw things from her perspective. They believed that her grief and her state of mind led her to this horrible tragedy. Others saw her as a baby killer, someone with no remorse, and they had every reason to feel that way. Till this day, many who learn of this story find themselves torn, unsure of what to believe. Caroline was released on $75,000 bail in May of 1995 after serving 8 months at Rikers, but she wasn't allowed to leave New York City, and on March 4th of 1996, she pled guilty in a Queens courtroom for the suffocation of her newborn daughter. She was at first charged with second-degree murder, but struck a deal with the Queens District Attorney, and it was changed to the lesser charge of manslaughter. As per the conditions of her sentencing, she was allowed to go back to Great Britain, where she would have to serve 5 years probation and would need to undergo intensive psychiatric treatment for no less than a year. After almost 2 years of overseas phone calls with lawyers and their daughter's future hanging in the balance, Caroline's parents had a lot more to say about how this situation was handled, with them and others calling the process harsh, calling it primitive and uncivilized, something the judge presiding over the case did not take lightly. He then delivered her sentence, allowing her to return home. Caroline's actions would raise major questions on how to handle situations like this in the court system, cases where someone's mental health issues might play a major role. But regardless of the circumstances surrounding her actions, a child lost her life, and the way the court saw it, there was nobody else to blame. By March 8th of 1996, Beale was back in Britain, and she was all smiles. She was set to arrive at Maudsley Hospital in South London for treatment. Upon her arrival, she told reporters that it felt wonderful to be back home. She was shown to be in a totally different state of mind. She seemed perfectly normal. The following footage shows tense moments in court as the judge shared a few thoughts of his own, making the same judgments about Britain's justice system and how they had a history of mishandling cases themselves.
Welcome back. Caroline Beale, the British woman who killed a newborn baby in America, arrived back in Britain today for psychiatric treatment. But in New York, the judge who sentenced her made some astonishing remarks about British justice. Here's Ian Glover-James.
The nightmare in New York is over. Caroline Beale back in London, entering a psychiatric institute for treatment, part of the deal that freed her.
Good to be back, Caroline.
Wonderful.
How the New York court system has handled this case has been attacked by Caroline Beale's parents. Sentencing her last night, the judge fired back.
It is my understanding that Mrs. Beale's family has frequently criticized our justice system and the prosecution in this case for being, and I quote, barbaric and uncivilized in our treatment of the defendant and our laws which allowed the prosecution in the first place. As to their criticism of our laws, I will say this. With our laws that mandate the prosecution of people who kill their children, protecting the children rather than excusing the killer is our primary focus in this country.
And the Irish-American judge then attacked British conduct of some IRA trials like that of the Guildford Four, while setting her probation terms.
That probation is going to be served in Great Britain, that great country that has convicted a great many people on a perjured testimony of their police, allowed them to spend 15 or 17 years in prison, did everything to see that they remained in prison even though they knew or should have known that it didn't belong in there. But anyway, I won't let that interfere with what I'm doing here.
Nor should he, according to British lawyers monitoring the case.
The most remarkable thing is that he ventures off into the political world. Again, you wouldn't hear a judge in this country say that, or indeed anything like it. And if he did, he'd probably get a stiff letter from the Lord Chancellor.
Now Caroline Beale needs psychiatric help.
Caroline is safe and well. She's very tired.
Tired, but in expert hands here, a condition of her New York bail. Ian Glover-James, News at 10 in South London.
She stood there, listening in silence. In video not shown here, Caroline eventually stated that she believed the court system was fair to her, to which the judge replied, "Fair to you? I think we leaned over backwards." Many might think that because of the outrage surrounding Caroline's case, and her hailing from Britain, might have had something to do with her lenient sentence. But it's also important to remember this. Out here, the people who are accused of killing their children are often let off with a slap on the wrist. A lot of the people who have been tried and convicted of heinous crimes against their children are out free today. It's a much bigger issue than many might think. If you need any evidence of that, just look at the stories I cover on this channel. People end the lives of their kids and get out in a few years. There are people who've been behind those walls for much, much longer, for crimes that never resulted in the loss of a human life. Unfortunately, it's something we see far too often.
Oh my fucking God, my brothers and sisters. I sat right here for a couple of minutes just hoping and praying. I'm just thinking that something gonna happen. You know what I'm saying? Well, they gonna change this sentence up. And she gonna end up still going to prison some kind of freaking way. And it seems like we not getting that, my brothers and sisters. It seems like there's another fucking parent out here who kill their children and only serve a little time and just get off with a freaking slap on the freaking wrist. You know what I'm saying, man? I was just sitting right here hoping, y'all. I'm listening to the judge. I'm listening to her. I'm listening to Jose. I'm just hoping he gonna say that, but she end up still going to damn prison, man. And all she got was she a maniac. Oh, she crazy. She gotta go in the psychiatric ward and all that right there. Are you free? This shit is bullshit, man. This is bullshit. Long story short, short story long.
Olivia Ann's body was eventually exhumed and flown to England for proper burial. The burial was attended by family and a priest who had been offering his support to Caroline while she was in prison. Now, basically a free woman, she would spend her time writing letters to the women who showed their support and who she says looked out for her while she was at Rikers. And by early 1997, she was back to working her old job at the Department of Health.
Well, goddamn it, ain't that so convenient? You go off, kill your freaking child, and long story short, story long, you end up working right back where you was working before you killed your child, and everything all good again. And another thing that's pissing me the fuck off and been pissing me off, it started with her parents, but she got so many people out here who support her and think that she's the victim in this freaking story and you killed your freaking child. Are we even making sense? Is this real life, my brothers and sisters? What the fuck, man? And Jose right, he have covered a lot of stories, man, where the freaking goddamn mother murderers, they get off. I mean, how could you not charge her? Like, how is she not guilty?
She had the following to say about what took place. Whatever they said to me, I'd just say yes to it because I wanted so much to go home. I couldn't take any more of going to court and being so ill. She would later add, "It doesn't interfere with my work at all. I kind of switch it off and go on with my work." Remarks like this made it very hard for some to feel bad for Caroline. It came off more about her experience. It came off more about her experience in prison rather than the crime that she had been convicted of. The media was more caught up with what she went through, as if there wasn't a deceased newborn baby at the center of it all.
Exactly, Jose. That's another thing. The freaking media perpetuating it as if she the victim too. Like, they in on it in this case. At least I'm not gonna say all of the media, but a lot of them like portraying it and making a story about her. And we forgot about the newborn child that only got to live for freaking 15 minutes before she killed.
Caroline said she felt an overwhelming urge to bring her baby back home with her, and that's why she didn't just discard of her. Many might argue that keeping this child a secret was just as neglectful. She stated she thought her child had already died inside of her, but a doctor's visit would have made it clear that this wasn't the case. Her constant sickness and symptoms were also signs. It's safe to say that a lot of people who learn of this story won't know what to believe. For others, The evidence and testimonials from experts speak for themselves. In hindsight, Paul stated that there were some red flags that he had overlooked, although he never thought anything close to this would ever happen, and he had no clue his fiancée was ever pregnant. Her and Paul barely spoke after. Their relationship was over. Whether you believe Caroline Beale took her child's life on purpose or did it by accident due to her mental health, the details of the case can't be ignored. While lawyers and family talked about how Caroline was treated, it seems many forgot about the child, a child that was kept secret for the entire time that she grew inside Caroline's womb, something the child had absolutely no control over. Most might say that this baby wasn't even wanted, but others say different. This was a secret that caused suffering for everyone involved. When they were already grieving over the loss of a loved one, everyone else got to move forward. They were able to put this behind them as best as they could. But for baby Olivia Ann, she had no say, and she spent her only moments on this earth fighting for her life. I'm not saying this wasn't hard for everyone. I'm not saying that grief and depression didn't play their part. What I am saying is that this child did not have to die. On April 7th of 1996, the Evening Standard, a newspaper in London, published an article with a headline that read, "Tragic story of mother who smuggled her dead baby must be told." I couldn't agree more, and it really doesn't matter how much time has passed. Rest in peace, Olivia Ann. You aren't forgotten.
Jesus Louises, my brothers and sisters. This one is one of those ones, like Jose said, that when you hear it, you be like, damn, I never heard no craziness like that before. Like, dude. And not only the fact of what she did, freaking not telling nobody that she pregnant, having a baby in the freaking tub, killing the baby, then going out with the baby wrapped around her out in public, walking around the city, then try to sneak the freaking baby, her baby, back to London. Now, not only that would make the story crazy, the fact that she got away with it. That is the part that just killing me, y'all. The fact that this lady really didn't even face any consequences for real. That's mental, whatever she was doing type of thing. It was like she on probation for freaking killing somebody in my eyes. You know what I'm saying? Like she doing freaking community service for freaking killing somebody. And it was a freaking newborn baby and it was your baby. Her the way she did her baby dad is so effed up in this story. But her parents, I was trying to say, and I was saying like, yeah, I understand, I get that the parents want to not believe that this is her, she actually did this, whatever, but it's so much writing on the wall. And then as her parents, you got to think about this, she killed y'all freaking grandchild, you know what I'm saying? So it just so crazy, man. Then you got all these other people, outside people, the media, the people when she was in jail, like supporting her and making it out like she the victim, and she got away with it, my brothers and sisters. That is the freaking part that just gonna stick with me more than any freaking thing, man. And I was sitting right there for a while, just waiting. I'm just waiting on Jose to say, but still, she ended up going to prison or something, man. I'm thinking like, there is no way she can get away with this, but she got away with it. I done said that like 5 times now, man, my brothers and sisters. But I digress. I'm gonna go and let y'all go now, because this one right here, like, you can just keep talking and you can throw out a lot of theories about a lot of different stuff. Like, some people would throw out a theory just real quick, man, that you could throw out a theory that you could make the argument that how did the freaking baby daddy not know that she was pregnant? Like, seriously, man, if y'all was together, even if y'all not having sex, bro, if y'all living in the same house all the time, it's kind of hard to freaking believe that you didn't know that she was pregnant, unless she literally was all the time 24/7 wearing some big ass baggy shirts and hoodies and long sleeves, whatever, you know what I'm saying? Like, all the freaking time, man. And I don't know, man. It's just a theory you can go out there, throw out there, and there's a lot different more you can too, my brothers and sisters. But let me shut my ass up now, man. We have been here long enough. Like I said, I'm going to go and let y'all go. Y'all just please hit that like button, comment, subscribe if you ain't did that yet. And come on back tomorrow for another Coffee Man Friday. But until then, my friends, also, remember this. Love, peace, and happiness. Stay safe. Don't stop. Keep going. Yeah.